I am the youngest of four kids. And in your work, you discuss how that can be consequential in my relationship with risk and convention and all of those things. What does the data say about siblings and how the order in which they're born can determine their character skills?
Okay, we need a giant disclaimer on this. The science of birth order is a mess. Right. It's full of conflicting findings. A lot of the world's leading experts don't agree on the patterns. And what I'm going to tell you is I think there are two patterns that have very consistent evidence across large samples and rigorous studies, but they are tiny effects, tiny. So they don't say anything about you and your future possibilities. There are patterns across very, very big samples. So let me start with the bad news for you, Steve, which is on average, firstborns score slightly higher on IQ tests than their younger siblings.
Agree to disagree. I'm joking.
You're welcome to disagree on that.
I'm joking. That does make sense.
The major mechanism that seems to explain it is what's called the tutor effect, which is if you're the firstborn and you have younger siblings, you end up teaching them a lot. And when you explain things, you remember them better and you understand them better. Like the best way to learn something is to teach it. And the lastborn doesn't have a younger sibling to teach. And so sometimes they just miss out on that opportunity. Tiny, tiny difference on average. You will find many brilliant laterborns, many average intelligence firstborns. So don't take anything from that. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting finding. To the point that you raised, the other finding is that laterborns tend to be more willing to take risks and become originals. And my favorite example of this comes from research Frank Soloway did on sports. So this is a study of every pair of brothers who ever played Major League Baseball. So you've got two siblings, same family, same parents, same upbringing. They both make it to the pros. Actually, sometimes there's even a trio. And the question is, which brother takes more risks when it comes to stealing a base? Which, in American baseball is one of the riskiest things you can do because it's very easy to get out because you have to basically outrun a ball that's flying in the air. And you have to outsmart a pitcher and a guy who's ready to catch the ball. And it turns out that the laterborns are much more likely to take those risks. They're more likely to try to steal a base, and they are also more likely to succeed in stealing a base. So you're a lastborn. Why? Like, where does this penchant for risk-taking come from? What's your hunch about the mechanisms?
Oh, gosh. I know what it is. Because I saw it in your writing and I was like, that's it. It's my parents gave me way more freedom. When I was 10 years old, and I say this a lot, but when I was 10 years old, if I left the house and I didn't come home for 2 days, there was no consequences. Whereas I watched my sister try that when she was that same age, and it was like we would call the police. If she wasn't yes. home before like 10, we'd call the police. And as they went through the cycle of having kids and they got to the fourth one, it was almost like, I say this all the time, it was like they had assumed I was the age of the others and they assumed that their job of parenting had been done. And that's what I attribute it to. Because in that independence, in that void, you can start to experiment and you can start to learn and take risks. And then you get the feedback from those experiments, which for me was starting businesses at 12, 13, 14, first kid in our family to not go to university. So it made a lot of sense when I read about it. And I also do believe that all my siblings have a higher IQ than me. I think if we did an IQ test, I think every one of my siblings would beat me on it. And I think they would all agree. My brothers are geniuses compared to me. Jason, the sibling that's a year older than me, went to 2 of the best universities, etc. He's a genius. He's much smarter than I am. But he will even say that what he learned from me was risk. He said it this Christmas. He was like, when you came to my house at when I was 18 and I slept on his sofa, he goes, he was in a university, he was off to get, really, really great job as like an actuary. He had gone to the London School of Economics to study that. And I was this dropout sleeping on his sofa because I'd stopped by London. And he said to me at Christmas, he was like, the fact that you weren't concerned about your future, it inspired me, which ultimately led him to quit his job in the city. He was like, I learned from you risk-taking.
Wow.
And yeah.
So that's amazing because you benefited from extra freedom and independence. Yeah. And then you were able to actually pay that back to an older brother. Yeah. I think for me, that's also the most compelling reason why laterborns end up taking more risks and trying new things. There is another theory that has some support that I think might be an additional piece of the story, which is Usually the firstborn ends up sort of impressing parents by being a conventional achiever. And then the thinking is that niche is filled. And as a laterborn, you got to find a way to stand out. Like, well, getting good grades in school is not going to differentiate me from my older siblings. They're always going to be ahead of me. So let me try something that's a little bit road less traveled.
Well, I completely relate to that as well. Risk-taking. It is often believed that risk-taking is a key factor in what makes entrepreneurs successful in their life. But your research and your work in Originals in chapter 1, page 17, kind of starts to debunk that myth in, I think, a really liberating way.
This is good news for me as somebody who's not a big risk taker. It turns out that risk takers are more likely to become entrepreneurs, but the most successful entrepreneurs don't love risk. They take cautious risks, and they're constantly trying to figure out how to reduce the downside and increase the upside. I guess this goes in two directions. One direction is to say, if you never take a risk, that's actually a risky way to live your life. It's like building a stock portfolio where you only invest in safe, predictable mutual funds. No, you need a balanced portfolio. You're actually safer if you have some risky investments and some more cautious investments. And I think life is like that too. I think on the other side of that, though, you don't want to just be throwing caution to the wind and making a bunch of dumb bets. What you want to do is you want to figure out what's the probability of this unproven idea succeeding, and then do whatever you can to raise those odds.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.